So we separated everything out. We weighed every single species of everything. We took 1% and we set it aside. This is 1% of every single species of stuff that's down here.
Yes, this is an enormous amount of variety of produce. I've never seen anything like this before. Even in the supermarket, I've never seen anything like this before.
We really appreciate our Kohanim.
We're more than happy to be the recipients
yeah.
exactly of such splendid, amazing produce.
Okay, so now what do we do?
Okay, so just a little bit of background here, if that's okay. So we have these mitzvos known as Trumos
And Maasros.
and Maasros. So where did it come from? When the Jewish people came into the land of Israel was divided up into 12 regions, one for each tribe. However, the tribe for the Kohanim and the Leviim didn't get any land. And in an agricultural society, it's very problematic because there's no supermarkets.
But they did get the Beis HaMikdash. So,
We did get a Beis HaMikdash, but that was work. That was called going to work.
Okay.
Yeah, and there were perks there also.
Okay.
So Hashem worked it out that no problem. The Jewish people and the main bulk of the Jewish people and the Kohanim and the Leviim will have a partnership.
Okay.
Kohanim and Leviim will be responsible for spiritual endeavors and teaching and that kind of thing. And everyone else will do work and we'll just do a partnership. So it worked out very well. That brought us to the mitzvahs of Trumos and Maasros. And each one has its own sort of spiritual background, which we're not going to go into right now.
Okay.
But also the sort of technical numbers, how to go about doing it. So the way actual numbers of how it works is the first thing, whenever you have a whole crop of produce, for each species, the farmer or the owner of that particular land will go and give what's called Truma Gadola. That first part, and the recipient for that Truma are the Kohanim.
Okay.
And any local Kohen can come knock on the door. Hi, Renoff, so I'd love to receive some Truma. Do you have any available for me? And
Really?
you'd be, yes, in fact, I have a whole pile in my fridge or in my garden, or you know what, today we don't have, come back next week. And they would wander the land to all the different communities looking for all kinds of Truma. Okay, how much would we have to go and give for that Truma Gadola? So the Torah doesn't actually have an exact number. It says an average person will give 2%, a stingy person might give 1%, and a generous person might give 3%. Okay, but a regular person is 3%. That's fine. That's our first separating.
Truma,
That's
okay.
called Truma. And that goes to the Kohanim. Now the Kohens had a bit of a technical, logistical element, which is that they're only allowed to actually eat the produce if they're in a state of spiritual purity, of tahara, which we don't really have today. So as a result, we're not technically Kohanim, which I am one, we're not actually allowed to eat the produce. But,
So you can give it to your dog.
right, but it's useful for our whole household, which means that myself and my wife and my kids or other household members will be able to eat it.
Including pets.
Including our pets. So I happen to not have any pets. I have 4 kids, which is more than enough, so I don't need any pets separately. But if I had pets or I had livestock,
You could bring this home and feed
I
it to
absolutely
them.
home. In fact, here in Yerushalayim, we have an amazing thing where the animals in the zoo are partially owned by Kohanim, and the big industrial suppliers take the Truma produce
Is that
and bring
true?
it to the zoo. This is what I've heard, and this is what
Do
they
you
say.
guys hear this? The animals in the zoo are partly owned by a Kohanim organization. So the Trumos and Maasros from the big Badatz organizations, they give it to the zoo and can feed it to the animals.
It's an amazing thing here in Israel that we have such a phenomenon.
Maggie's going to the zoo tomorrow.
Okay, well,
I'm going
Maggie,
to tell her
know.
to look into that.
We'll
yeah.
see, maybe she'll find some Kohanim there. Feeding the animals.
That's actually pretty cool.
It is
So
very cool.
it doesn't get wasted.
That's not good. It's one of the amazing things that we have here in Israel.
That's
now
very
that's a
cool.
unique phenomenon when it comes to Truma, that we have this restriction that people Kohanim have to be tahor in order to do
But
it.
animals
Okay, but animals not.
Okay.
That's number one. That's our first section, which we'll call that 2% normal.
Okay.
Okay. Then we have the next offering, which is called Maaser Rishon. Maaser Rishon, Maaser comes from the word eser, because it's one, which means 10, because Maaser has a fixed amount, which is 10%. And this 10% goes to the Levium.
That's tithing.
That's our next tithing. Really, they're all kind of tithing, but
this
this
is
is a
okay.
special, we'll call this tithing. If you like that,
Oh,
that
this
works.
goes to the Levium.
This is designated for the Levium.
Okay.
And it does not have a restriction of Tuma, Tahar, and
right.
that kind of thing, so there's no problem. And in addition to that, Levium are allowed to share it with whomever they like.
Okay.
Kohanim can only use their Truma for their household and pets, and the Levium can give it to anyone they want.
Like if a Kohen has a guest in their house?
Would not be able to eat from the Truma.
Wow.
It's a very common phenomena when you have, let's say, married kids, where
Their son-in-law
my
cannot
daughter, who's a Bas Kohen now, when she gets married, if she marries someone who's not a Kohen, which is a possibility,
also can't eat
she
here.
would now lose her
Right.
Kohen Trumas privileges.
My grandmother was Bas Kohen.
Okay.
Yep.
So she when she married your grandfather, she lost her
Right.
ability to eat
Wow.
Truma. So in the once upon a time, You can imagine our complexities today of milk and meat and all these
But
kind
your
of things.
daughter-in-law could eat it.
Daughter-in-law, exactly. She'd get opted in. But once upon a time, they would have kitchens not only for meat and dairy,
but
they
for
also had
Trumos
for Truma and
and
other kudshim, as well as secular stuff.
Actually, pretty crazy.
It's pretty
so
wild.
So, like a Kohen that wants to have guests for Shabbos, let's say, in the times of Beis Hamikdash, actually has to not cook with Truma, so that.
Exactly.
Wow.
Wow. Very exciting stuff we have to look forward to, yeah?
I mean, I'm dealing with celiac right now, and I feel like I'm like not so unhappy to not have to add
we
that.
We have the gluten kitchen and the non-gluten kitchen, exactly. Okay,
Wow.
so now we're up to Maaser Rishon, which is for the Levi. We take 10% and we set it aside 10% for the Levi.
10% of this or in addition?
We'll get there in a second how we actually do it. But
I'm not
theoretically
cutting
speaking,
anymore.
I know we're done cutting, don't worry. We spent an hour cutting, we're all good to
Okay.
go. Yeah, so we have our 2% for the Kohen. Now the next section is the 10% for the Levi. But a perk of the Levi is that the Levi can share it with whomever he wants. There's no restriction. Great. Then after that 10%, we have another 10% known as Maaser Sheni. But it actually depends a little bit on what year we're in. Sometimes it's Maaser Sheni.
But the third,
sometimes
we're
Maaser
in the
Ani.
year.
We are now in the
third year.
So this
I know about that.
You talked about
I
this?
love Shemitah. I know
Amazing.
about Shemitah.
So
Okay.
Shemitah is every 7th year, but it means that there's something called a Shemitah cycle,
Right.
which is 7 years, a 7-year cycle.
Right.
But that 7-year cycle is actually broken into 3 parts. There's a 3 years, another 3 years,
And then the last
1
year.
year Shemitah. So during the 3-year cycle, the 3-year cycle, or the 3-year segment, is a 2 and a 1. The first 2 are Maaser Sheni years, and the 3rd year, which we happen to be in right now, since Rosh Hashanah, we're now in a Maaser Ani year. Now, Maaser Sheni is something that the owner himself or herself keeps.
We actually spoke about that in
we
the
did.
newsletter.
Okay, Maaser.
No, I spoke about that in the newsletter.
Amazing. So the Maaser Ani goes
Yeah.
to needy individuals. Okay. Now, to add a little bit of complexity here, we don't look at the calendar necessarily what it is today. We look at to see when the produce
Was grown,
came, when
was
either
planted, or
depend-
planted or picked,
right.
depending
Well,
on the
if
species.
it's tree fruit, we go by when it blossomed, from being a
Right.
flower to being a bulb, and we looked at regular
When it's
vegetables by
planted.
when it's cut. Now, when it's
when it's
grains,
right, or when it's
grains are when it's
Okay.
rooted, so which usually is about a month after the seeds go
Yeah.
in. It depends exactly on the
So
species,
cool.
but the vegetables go by when they're cut off the vine. And the reason that's very interesting because most vegetables, if you leave them on the vine, they'll just keep on growing,
Yeah.
assuming water and sun conditions and
fruit
all that.
will
Fruit
rot.
will just fall off the tree. Okay, so that's the Maaser Sheni and Maaser Ani. That's also 10%. So again, we have 2%
We're at
for the Kohen,
100%. There's
10%
no fruit
for the Levi, another 10% for either Maaser Sheni or Maaser Ani.
Okay.
That takes care of all of our produce. Now, one more point to make out, which is that Maaser Ani belongs to the poor people. That's our 3rd year Maaser Ani, which we're in right now, which all of the vegetables we have were all for sure cut this year because when they cut vegetables, they make it to the market within a week or two. Not 6 months later, they're for sure gone, right? Tree fruit is a little more complicated because it depends on when it blossoms. So that's more of a project. But in any event, even though it belongs financially to the poor people, anyone's allowed to eat it, assuming the poor person allows.
Okay.
So you could share it, basically.
Okay.
However, now's where things get complicated. The Maaser Sheni, which we have in the 1st and 2nd years of the 3-year part, so that Maaser Sheni has Kedusha, a special holiness to it, and can only be eaten in a state of ritual purity and only within the walls of the old city.
Okay.
Now this is where we get
Is
problematic.
there a zoo in the old city?
We do not yet have a zoo. Yes, the old city is often a zoo, but not the kind you're thinking of. Yeah.
Okay.
So we have so the Torah has a solution for this. So we have a process called chilul, which means transference of kedusha from the produce onto coinage.
Okay, that's what we do during Shemitah.
And
Like
that's-
if you like if you go to let's say a store and you buy kedusha shvius, right, and you get back change.
Yeah.
So your change is
Has
hektish.
a kedusha.
Right.
Right.
Because it
Oh,
will
that
transfer.
respect, yes. So we can transfer that. Yes, there is an element of this is a different transference, but a similar process involved. So the Maaser Sheni produce, which has kedusha to it, we need to remove that kedusha or transfer it onto coinage.
coin.
And in the time of the Beis Hamikdash, they would take that money, that now kadosh, the holy coinage, and they would bring the money to the old city. And there was a temple and all that, and they could buy food with it and
Over
shawarma
there.
and all
Right.
kinds of things like that, which is very helpful if you were a watermelon farmer. Because you would not want to have to schlep your
All your
1,000
watermelons over there.
kilo of watermelons to the old city. You
Right.
can just bring a few pocketful of coins. Okay, now, how do we deal with the coinage today? There's a lot of nuance in the coinage, how it works, which we're not going to go into right now, but it has to involve certain types of coins and certain amounts, value amounts and all that, which is very complex. So it happens to be here in Yerushalayim. We have a great organization called Karen Maasrot, which takes care of this for us. So we joined. They have a coin sitting in the office.
We did join.
We joined. We are all set up. The coins are set aside, and they handle all the technical difficulties of
So we'll
the coin.
they'll like
And
take
they're-
this over. for
Exactly.
us.
Well, they're taking. We have to now make a declaration in terms of not just the physical separation, but in terms of how we go divide everything up.
Okay.
And then they'll take care of the coin management.
Okay.
On our behalf, because we joined the coin club.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So that's the basic background.
It's very cool.
We're good to
yeah.
go. Okay. Excellent. Alrighty. So now what we're going to do now.
Like if Mashiach comes, will they give me my coin?
You can do it with your own coin, actually, if you really wanted.
Well, I want my coin back from this.
Well, we share the coins. We're part of the club. We're
Me
the
and
coin
you?
club.
But
All
you're a
of us.
Kohen. I'm gonna give. Oh.
Well,
okay.
So interesting
Yeah.
that you bring it up. If I'm a farmer, right,
Yeah.
then I would also have an issue of untithed
Right.
produce, which I have to all separate out.
Oh.
So some of it belongs. Well, once it's separated, that part would belong for me. Other parts belong to a Levi
Ani or whatever,
Right,
Levi.
exactly. And if we had a
Okay,
Levi
that's
nearby,
fair.
or if we had a wife of the Levi nearby, we could give her.
Honestly, it's
this.
not worth it for Kohanim to be farmers. It's too complicated.
Well, maybe that's why the Torah didn't give quantum land.
Yeah,
We just had to
okay.
wander around, all knocking other people's doors, yeah? Okay. Just to add one other point here is that it's uncertain whether this has been taking Trumas and Maasros off. We don't know.
Right.
That's our dilemma.
But
here.
I am certain that we took Trumos Maasros.
Well, we've separated it.
Yes,
We've now done
we've
our
done
cutting,
everything.
But from the farmer and the distribution, the system, we don't know what's going on here.
That's true.
Most of our supermarkets here that we shop at, it's all taken care of for
But
us.
this
It's very
came
easy.
directly from farms.
This came direct from a farmer. We don't know the farmers personally. I don't know the farmers personally. You don't
I
know them
don't, I
personally.
don't.
So it's hard to know exactly what's going on. So because of a doubtful situation, we're going to do it ourselves.
Okay.
So now, since it's a doubtful situation, we can rely on all kinds of special rules on how to make it easy for ourselves, which we prefer to do. So what we've now done here is we've cut off about 1%.
A little more
of
than
this.
1%.
A little more, exactly, that's very important. It's 1% plus a little bit extra.
We were very makbid.
We had a scale, and we measured everything
Yeah,
out,
yeah,
and we
yeah.
have a ton of produce here, and this whole thing going on.
Every single species was measured separately. Like we
We
did
had-
not mix jalapenos and chisitos. They were separate.
Right, you're not speaking my language anymore, but I'm happy to taste the aftermath.
Fine.
Okay. Alrighty, here. So here's what we're gonna do. Yeah, you're gonna read this for us. Okay.
Oh, I read it? Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So here we go. So we can also translate if you want, depending on what's going on here. So you're gonna read the red bit. Okay.
Okay.
So what we're gonna do here is this is what we're saying here is that we have a combination of different species. So you're going to include this phrase here, kal min almino, so it covers everything in one shot.
Okay.
Unless you want to do 60,
No,
times,
no.
then we've
No.
covered that, yeah?
Okay.
Okay. And also, you're going to include the phrase here, like all peros ve'yirakot. Right,
Ve'yirakot,
because we're
okay.
including all kinds of things. And I think that's all the options that we have here. And then what's happening on a technical basis is you're making a declaration. And what you're basically saying is that of all of our produce here, each species in and of its own, yeah, we're separated it out, a section for the Kohanim. That's called Truma. And that's what's happening here.
Okay.
One thing I didn't mention is that even the Levi who receives his Maaser Rishon has also an obligation to give to the Kohen.
From that.
10% of what he receives. He receives 10%, he gives 30%. So what we're going to be
like
doing
that.
here, exactly, it's a 1%er, yeah?
Yeah.
What we're going to do here is we're actually going to be separating out first Truma, we're putting that here, which is really only 1%, but we're adding a little bit extra in there.
Right.
Okay. Then we're also going to be separating out Maaser Rishon. Now that Maaser Rishon belongs to the Levi, but you're allowed to eat it.
Okay, fine.
So therefore, where's that Maaser Rishon in this pile here? It's actually mixed into this produce here.
Okay, so we're just
So
gonna.
we're going to leave it, and we're allowed to eat it, and that's all great.
Okay.
And the same thing with the Maaser Ani.
It's because
We're
the
allowed to
anis
eat
let
it.
us eat it.
Exactly. It's nice to give tzedakah afterwards in compensation,
Okay.
which we're always happy to go and do.
Yes.
And then the Maaser Rishon, for the Levi has to separate that extra bit for the Kohen, that's the extra bit. The 1%
Oh, that's why we
extra.
took extra.
Exactly. So we have
Okay.
a little bit extra. So we have the combinations which you have in mind here.
We've covered
We
everything.
covered everything. It's all here. This is the part that it will be the main produce that we're allowed to eat, including the Maaser Rishon and the Maaser Ani, and in addition to that, any Maaser Sheni, which is mostly going to be from the fruit that grew from before Rosh Hashanah, it
Okay.
blossomed before Rosh Hashanah, also with the coin thing, and that we're going to find
Here.
as well. You're going to read that as well.
Okay, kolish on
Now we're going to wrap this up.
Okay.
Just like what you do when you're mafresh your challah.
Like I wrap it up 3
What do
times.
you do? Wrap it up? Same thing.
Okay.
Same level of kedusha.
Wow.
By the way, that afresh's challah also belongs to the Kohen.
Right,
When I
yeah,
come
yeah,
to the
yeah.
door to get my produce, I'm coming for the challah also. Just so we're clear.
This is it?
That's
Okay,
it.
that's
Now I have to deal with it. Now I have to deal with your mess.
We'll take the garbage out.
Exactly. So,
Okay,
good,
thank
I'll see
you. Thank
It
you
was
so
my
much for
pleasure.
being
It's
here. This
great.
is Rabbi
Let me
Brian
do it.
Schneider. Tell them where they can find you.
Okay, where can you find me? So I run an amazing organization called Justify, and we run Jewish trips to third world countries, amazing educational opportunities of volunteering and chesed and doing wonderful, wonderful stuff. And I also teach at Jewessence, an awesome organization which happens to be run by the most amazing person, also known as
Shava Schneider. She actually is a very amazing person.
better known as my wife. And I also teach at Aish. And I'm happy to be around. Thank you so much, Anil. Pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Thank you for coming and helping us.